Hare Krishna. Let us start the today's session with prayers. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So welcome everyone for the second chapter, second session. Unfortunately, we could not do it last week because of some technical error. So we will see the second half of the second chapter today. And if anybody has any questions, you can please post it in the chat section. Provided the time permitting, we will try to address that, or otherwise also we will get back to you later. So we were discussing of the second chapter. We had discussed up to the 38th verse, in the which is section 3, where in the first section Arjuna had expressed his confusion and submission, and in the second section Krishna had described Sankhya Yoga, the analytical knowledge of the soul, with examples and all that. And in the section 3, Krishna had highlighted the prescribed duty of fighting to Arjuna. And the section 4 we will be discussing today, and section 5. So section 4 is verses 39 to 53. So we had discussed already last week about 15-20 minutes when we had that in this section can be named as Buddhi Yoga. So where Krishna is explaining to Arjuna how to work in God consciousness, and how to work for the satisfaction of Krishna, and how to work without expecting results. So all these types of work can be categorized as Buddhi Yoga. So the art of working in Krishna consciousness. And the last section will be section 5, that will be verses 54 to 72. So where Krishna is explaining to Arjuna about the symptoms of the person who is fixed in transcendence. So to start with verse 39, so Krishna summarizes the previous section by saying, thus far I have described to the Sankhya Yoga, and now I'll describe to you how to work in Krishna consciousness. And here he also importantly says one line, if you see, O son of Pruta, when you act by such intelligence, that means such intelligence means Krishna consciousness, you can free yourself from bondage of works. So basically in our Shastras, there is a description about Panchopasana. So it says that for the everyday today activities, if we have to get freed from the sins that we commit intentionally or unintentionally. Why unintentionally? Because the science says even when you are breathing, so there are a lot of germs and bacteria that are getting killed. When you light fire for cooking, so many organisms, microorganisms get killed. So when you walk, so many insects are trampled to death. So in other words, in our day-to-day lives, it is inevitable to avoid sin or pain to other living entities. So, but if one has to get freed, the Panchopasana means worshipping 5 principal deities. So the 5 principal deities are Vishnu, Shiva, Devi, and Surya, and Ganesha. So, and this Panchopasana, if you go into the details, you will have to do from the rituals from morning till night. So you can't even do any other activity. Only then you can be freed from the sinful effects. So that is practically not possible. On the other hand, Krishna is explaining here that if you can engage in Krishna consciousness, means work for the satisfaction of Krishna, so then you will not be entangled in the bondage of works. And moving on to text 40, and in this process of working for Krishna, there is no loss. Krishna is explaining that Swalpamapi asya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. And there is no loss. On the other hand, one can save oneself from the greatest risk, greatest danger. And what is the danger? Danger is degrading to the lower species of life. And we also discussed about Ajamila and how he got that in the last session. So we'll move on to the verse 41. So verse 41, Krishna again continuing the same thing about Buddhi Yoga. So that is work in Krishna consciousness for the satisfaction of Krishna. So only such people, they can be resolute in purpose, and their aim will be one. So only such people will have the understanding that Vasudeva is everything. But whereas those people whose intelligence is many branched, that means they are caught up in the dualities of good and bad, Papa and Punya, just like Arjuna did a big analysis. So such people, their intelligence will be many branched and they will be irresolute in purpose. Means they cannot hold on to the conviction that Vasudeva Sarvamiti Samahatma Sudurlabhaha. So that is why it is written Sudurlabhaha. One person who coming to such consciousness is very, very rare. And in the next 2 3 verses we can discuss together, that is 42, 43 and 44. Krishna is giving example of how Vedas have certain flowery words. So how to get good birth, how to get good opulence, power, heavenly planets, good wife, good husband, so good children. So like that there are different things explained in the Shastras, and Krishna is warning a devotee, especially those who are interested in serving Krishna, following Krishna consciousness. Such people should not get carried away by such offers, because these offers, although it may look very lucrative at the beginning, but eventually it will lead us nowhere. So, and therefore, Krishna is telling we have to be careful. And here it is also important to note that what Krishna is talking about is sense enjoyment. Now, sense enjoyment is different from living modestly. So, living modestly means keeping working or taking care of the senses just so as to keep the body and soul together. So, we will not go into the details, but for time being, I think this much understanding is good enough that sense enjoyment is different from uh, engaging the senses just to maintain the body. So, and then in the next verse, that is 45, so 43 and 44, Krishna is saying that if you are engaging in sense enjoyment, then you will not be able to attain samadhi. So this is connected to the previous verse where Krishna talked about resolute and irresolute purpose. So Krishna is connecting that. So just like in the 41st verse, Krishna is talking about being resolute. So in the 44th verse, he is telling that if you are engaging in sense enjoyment, not for maintaining the body, but sense enjoyment, then you will not be able to have the resolute purpose to serve the Lord. So samadhi will not be possible for those who are relishing sense enjoyment or sense gratification. So, and then in the next verse, 45th, Krishna talks about how people in this world, any work that we do is bound by three modes of material nature. So it says that it's just like a man is tied up with three ropes. So like that, everybody who is working in this world is bound by these three modes: sattva guna, rajoguna, and tamoguna. These are the three modes of material nature. So Krishna is telling Arjuna, but don't get bound by these things, rise above. Nirdvandva nitya sattvasta niryoga kshema atmavan. So Krishna is encouraging Arjuna that you please rise above these dualities. So dualities means no anxieties for gain and safety. So just like Arjuna in the previous chapter, he had analyzed that if I do this, what will happen? If I don't do, what will happen? He talked about Varna Shankara, unwanted population. He talked about material kingdom tainted with blood, even if he wins. So he was caught up in the dualities, whereas now Krishna is telling, work for Krishna consciousness, work for my pleasure without considering any of these things. And then in the 46th verse, Krishna is giving an example. So we had discussed this also in the previous session. So that how in villages there are different bodies of water for different purposes, such as taking bath, washing clothes, collecting water for drinking. But it is also said that one, if he goes to the river, then one can drink water also, one can wash clothes also, one can take bath also. So they can do everything if he goes to the river. But when there are independent bodies of water, then he will have to do only those activities which are permitted. So therefore Krishna is telling, they similarly, one who knows the purpose of the Vedas, for him everything is achieved. You don't have to get caught in the flowery words of the Vedas, because Krishna in the later chapters of Gita, he says sarvasya chaham hridhi sannivishto matta smritir jnanam apohanancha Vedaischa sarvairahameva vedyaha Vedanta krit veda videva chaham. He says, I am the one who is to be known from all the Vedas. I am the compiler of the Vedas. I am the knower of the Vedas. So, this is what Krishna is trying to analyze here. He's telling, don't get caught in the flowery words. So, instead, because I am the person to be known, Sarvasya chaham hridisannivishta, I am seated in everybody's heart. Matta smritir gnanam apohanam, from me comes, mattaha, from me comes smritir. Smritir means remembrance. Gnanam, knowledge. Apohanam, forgetfulness. All these three are coming from me, and I am supposed to be known from the Vedas. So Krishna is now indicating to Arjuna that if you know me, then everything is known. Just like if you go to river, everything else is achieved. All the purposes of individual bodies of water is achieved. So then in the next 47 and 48, it can be seen together. So in fact, the 47th verse, we can say this is the most frequently quoted verse. So if at all somebody I hear quoting Bhagavad Gita, I always see that this is the karmanye vadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. And it is also funny to say, although it's a mostly quoted verse, it is also the mostly misunderstood verse as well, because many times people take this verse out of context, and they don't really understand what Krishna meant here. So Krishna in this verse, when he is quoting this verse, he is bringing out four important elements. So although they're all almost similar, but he's still making four different statements. First of all, Krishna is telling he should not neglect his prescribed duty. You have the right to perform your prescribed duty, and so that means you should not neglect. You have the right to perform your prescribed duty. And the second aspect he says is, but you're not entitled to the fruits of action. That means you should perform your duty but not be attached to the fruits of that duty. And third, he says, never consider yourself to be the cause of the results. Or that means he's telling in other simpler words, he's saying that never consider yourself as the doer. Don't think that you are doing it. And then fourth, he says, and don't be attached to not doing your duty. In other words, the first and the fourth are almost similar, but Krishna is again and again stressing that don't be attached to not doing your duty. See, because the moment somebody tells you that you are not the doer, then we are also not inspired to do that activity. So we will say, okay, if that's how the world works, if I am not getting recognition for what I am, so then I am not inclined to do the activity. And sometimes this is the reason why a person, a real spiritualist who has not understood the spirituality or Bhagavad Gita from the right perspective, he tends to become inactive. He says, anyway, I am not doing my duty, I am not entitled to the results of action. So that is what Krishna is again telling, you should also do your duty. So it's a very tricky thing that Krishna is explaining. Saying you should do your duty but not be attached to your action. You are not the doer, but you cannot avoid doing the duty. So this is a little tricky thing. It requires more explanation and practice. So more importantly, and by saying all this, Krishna is telling that in the 48th verse, by performing your duty and by abandoning all attachment to success or failure. So that means not considering. So this is the meaning of not being attached to the results of the duty or the fruits of action. Because whenever we engage in any activity in the material world, we could be either successful or a failure. So we cannot be sure of what the outcome may be. So in such consciousness, without being attached to success or failure, when we do our duty, and such state of mind is called yoga. So this is where Krishna is defining the term yoga. Defining the term yoga. Yoga means such evenness of mind without considering the results of action, which Krishna has explained in the previous verse. So 47 and 48. So then next 49 and 50 can be seen together, where Krishna is telling, rid yourself. So he's again repeating the previous two verses concept. So get rid of yourself in terms of all the fruitive activities by devotional service and surrender fully to that Krishna consciousness, to that God consciousness. And those who want to enjoy the fruits of their work are called misers. So Krishna told in the previous verse, just excuse me. So Krishna mentioned in the previous verse that one should not be attached to the fruits of the work. And for such people who are attached to the fruits of their action, Krishna is calling them Krupanaha. Krupanaha means miser. What is a miser? Falahetavaha. One who is expecting the results of his activities. Such a person is called miser, Krupana. Whereas in the next verse, in the 50th verse, he also gives the contrast of what is the intelligent person. Intelligent person means he will get rid of both good and bad work, and he will engage in buddhi yoga, yoga karmasu kaushalam, the art of all work, that is remembering Krishna, working for the satisfaction of Krishna, following the directions of Krishna. So, and here it is important to note what Krishna is telling here: get rid yourself of all fruitive activities. He is not telling sinful activities. He is talking about fruitive fruitive activities means those activities where we are expecting the result. So either success or failure, whatever be the result. So Krishna is telling here one should get rid of all the fruitive act. That means we should only work for the satisfaction of Krishna. So why Krishna is again and again stressing this is because again in the previous verse, if you see, Arjuna had talked about success, failure, defeat, victory, and what will happen to all that. So therefore, Krishna is bringing up this point that do not get attached to the results of your activities. Instead, just perform buddhi yukto. So just work for the pleasure of Krishna, pleasure of me. So this is what he's telling, and we had discussed in the last session also that engaging in bhakti or activities of God consciousness or following the directions of Krishna, it means it is akarma. There are no reactions. So otherwise, Shastras explain that Abrahma Bhuvana Loko Punaravartino Arjuna. So that means from the Brahma Loka up to the last plan, Patala Loka, the human beings, the souls keep rotating based on the Punya and Papa accounts. So when we engage in good work, that will also get us Punya, and we have to again take a life, take a birth in the higher planets with greater facilities for enjoyment. And if we do Papa, then we get lower species of life and we have to suffer. So, but in either case of good activities or bad activities, sinful activities, one has to suffer. But instead, the intelligent will engage in bhakti. So that is what in 50th verse we see. And 51, 52 and 53, so Krishna is bringing out one common theme. So in the previous verse, the 49th verse, Krishna described Krupanaha. So now in this verse 51, he is describing the opposite of Krupana. So he is telling the wise. The wise here is defining as those who are engaged in devotional service. Buddhi yuktahi. Karmajam buddhi yuktahi. So such people who are wise and who engage in my service, they take refuge from the Lord, in the Lord, and therefore they free themselves from the cycle of birth and death because they have renounced the fruits of action, and in this way they can attain the state of samadhi, which is beyond all the miseries. In other words, Krishna is here giving the example of opposite of Krupana, which is called Brahmana. Brahmana in the Vedic dictionary described as Brahma Janati iti Brahmana. That means one who knows God consciousness, one who works towards following the directions of God. Such person is called Brahmana, which is exactly opposite to that of Krupana or the miser, which we discussed in the previous verse. So what is this quality of a Brahmana? He is engaged in the service of Krishna. What is the symptom of engaging in the service of Krishna? That means he is not attached to the results, rather only works for the pleasure of Krishna. And by doing all of this, one can attain samadhi. In this way, he can attain that state beyond all miseries. So, up till this verse, that is the 52nd, 53rd, all of these three put together, Krishna is talking about how engaging in Krishna consciousness. And in the 53rd verse also, it is almost the same theme, that when you are engaging in such Krishna consciousness, which is beyond the flowery language of the Vedas, which we discussed some time ago. See how Krishna is connecting all these verses. So, unless you see all of this as a chain, it is very difficult to understand. So, Krishna already talked about one should not be disturbed by the flowery words of the Vedas. So, here again, he is repeating that when your mind is no longer disturbed by such flowery language, and when you remain fixed in the trance of self realization, then that is the place where you have attained divine consciousness or samadhi. So here there is also one devotee, Madhavendra Puri, who says that he apologizes to the forefathers, to the devatas, and to the society that I am not able to fulfill any of my commitments or obligations to any of you because I don't have any other time other than to serve God. So kindly forgive me. So, in other words, Krishna is supporting this kind of a stance that one who is engaged in such akarma, so that is working for the pleasure of Krishna, working under the directions of Krishna, then he will not be bound by the good and bad, sinful actions or pious actions, reactions to this work. So that is the art of karma kaushalam, Krishna mentions. So in this section, Krishna explained from 38 verse, 39th verse to 53rd verse about the act of working in Krishna consciousness. So when Krishna explained all of this, then in the 54th verse, Arjuna will ask one question, that because Krishna in the last three verses talked about samadhi, so he talked about tada yogam avapyasi, samadhau achala buddhihi in the 53rd verse. So now Arjuna is becoming interested. He wants to know more. So just like when we talk about, say, for example, a rich man, so we will be more curious to know that, what are the assets that he has, what are the different types of opulences that he has, or when we sometimes hear of a kind of a disease, so we want to know what are the symptoms of the disease, what is making that person go through this. So similarly, now when Krishna is talking about samadhi, a person who is fixed in trance, now Arjuna is asking a question to Krishna in continuation of the previous description of Krishna about Buddhi Yoga in the beginning of the next section, that is 54 to 72. So we can call it as symptoms of Sthita Prajna. So because here in this verse, Krishna is asking that what are the symptoms of such a person? Such a person referring to symptoms of Sthita Prajna. So what is a person who has attained Samadhi? How does he speak? How does he sit? How does he walk? How will his activities be different from all other people's activities? So Arjuna wants to know more about such a Sthita Prajna. So then in the next verse, Krishna explains the first symptom. So that is where you see the text 55, Bhagavan Uvacha. So the first symptom that Krishna explains is when a man gives up all the varieties of sense desire which is arising from mental concoction. So why is Krishna telling the desires are arising from mental concoction? You may say that no, desires are coming from me. So I am thinking I am having those desires. So and why are you saying mental concoction? Concoction means it's an imagination. It doesn't exist. It's a speculation. So that is because Shastras explain that we are not this body but the soul. We are just wearing the dress of this body. So, in other words, whatever desires that we get for sense enjoyment based on our identification with the body, because we identify ourselves with this body, we get all these desires. So, but the fact that we are not this body itself is neglected. So, if you consider that fact, all the desires that our body and senses are generating, it is an illusion. So, therefore, Krishna is telling that all the desires of sense enjoyment is arising from mental concoction. And to further understand this particular point, Bhagavatam gives an example of a camel. So, the camel, it chews the thorns in the desert region. It chews the thorns, and what happens when it chews the thorns? Those thorns go and strike inside the portion of the mouth, and the blood comes out. And when the blood comes out, it camel is attributing the juice of the blood, which it doesn't understand that it is its own blood. So the camel is attributing that sweet blood to be the symptom or an output of the chewing the thorns. So, but actually that blood is its own. So thorn is only creating that piercing, and therefore because of that blood is coming out. So the Shastras give this example of a camel to explain that the desire, the sense of pleasure is naturally there in us, in the soul, but we artificially are attributing that desire to this body. So, therefore, Krishna is telling that when one gives up all such varieties of sense enjoyment which is arising from mental concoction, and when his mind fixes in the self alone, when his mind finds satisfaction in the self alone, in such a person is said to be in samadhi or sthita prajna, or in pure transcendental consciousness. So, this is the first symptom he explains. And in the next two verses, he talks about the second symptom, the verse 56 and 57. So Krishna is telling one who is not disturbed in spite of threefold miseries. So why is Krishna talking about threefold miseries? What are the threefold miseries? The threefold miseries are Adhyatmika Klesha, Adi Bhautika Klesha, and Adi Daivika Klesha. Adhyatmika Klesha means that is how these three are also called as Tapatraya. Tapa means problem and Traya means three. There are three kinds of miseries. So the first one is Adhyatmika Klesha. That is the miseries arising from one's own body and mind. One's own body meaning diseases of the body. Mind, today all of us know how different people are, so many, it's a huge rise in the percentage in relation to the mind problems. So somebody will go into depression, somebody says panic attack. So many kinds of diseases come connection to the mind. So these are all called adhyatmika klesha. Adi bhautika klesha means the miseries inflicted upon us by other living entities. The other living entities could be friends, family, relatives, animals, any other beings outside our self. And Adi Daivika Klesha means natural calamities. So there are floods, there are tornadoes, there is landsliding, so many kind of earthquake. So we see how these things also cause trouble to us. So all these three kinds of troubles are called as tapatraya, threefold miseries. So Krishna is telling that if one is not disturbed because of these three miseries, and one who is not elated in happiness, and who is not distressed in who is not disturbed by distress, so such a person is called a sage of steady mind. And similarly in the 57th also it's the same meaning. Now if it's the same meaning, why Krishna is repeating that, so we will not go into the details. So we will keep that for the later sessions where we will go in details some sections of the verses. So the 57th verse also Krishna is saying one who does not rejoice when he obtains good, nor lament when he obtains evil. So 56 and 57, that's why I said it's more or less similar thing. So just like in the example Prabhupada tells that in the Second World War, there were many very devoted women who had to send either their husband or father or brother or son to the World War, in the Second World War. And for those women who lost their relatives, be it husband or son or whatever, they all became atheists. In other words, we all know that yes, we have to pray to God, we believe in God, but when things are going well, that is fine. But the moment something doesn't work in our favor, so then we try to deny the existence of God. So that's what happened to all these women who lost their relatives. So whereas Krishna is telling that we have to, a person who is fixed in trance, that is sthita prajna, one of the symptom, the second symptom is telling is he is not happy when good things happens, or he doesn't lament so when bad thing happens. So in this context I would like to share a small short story. There was once a person who was very devoted, and he used to live his life along with an ox and his son. and he had a small piece of land which he used to cultivate with the help of his son, and he used to use the ox for tilling the land. So it so happened that there was an epidemic in the village, and he lost the ox. So he was very much mentally agitated, aggrieved, and so on the advice of some of his friends, he went to one nearby sadhu, and he expressed his plight of losing an ox, and how his farming has been curtailed because of not having that. So, and then in the process of explaining, he also asked the sadhu a question that, see, after hearing all this, I hope you will agree with me that it is one of the worst moments of my life. So, isn't it so? So then the sadhu said, maybe so, may not be so. So when the person heard this, maybe so or may not be so, he was little taken aback. He felt, I'm telling you the one of the worst distress that has happened to me, and you are saying maybe so or may not be so. How can that be? So somehow he got very agitated. He didn't like that sadhu, so he just came off. So very soon, in a few days, because of many people losing the oxen, their ox, the farmers, so the news reached to the king, and the king gave the gift of a horse to all those who had lost the ox. And hearing this farmer so was very much happy. So he was elated now, and then now he could recollect the words of that sadhu. So who said maybe so or may not be so. So now he rushed to the sadhu to apologize. And when he meets that sadhu, he apologizes and he tells that, yes, yes, what you told was true. That was not indeed a bad phase. So because I lost the ox, today I have been blessed with the gift of a horse. So your prediction was good. So in fact, this is a good thing that happened to me. So the moment he said, this is a good thing that happened to me, the sadhu said, maybe so, may not be so. So this person got surprised. He said, okay, that time I understood that it was I was in deep distress and I could not appreciate. But now this gift is is a happy moment. It's a jolly moment of rejoicing. But why isn't sadhu agreeing to it? Maybe sadhu is become envious of my gift. So therefore he's saying that. So no, no, maybe something wrong with him. So I will not consult him anymore. So he feels within like that, and he leaves the place. So and then he continues his process of farming. And once his son expresses the desire that he also wants to ride, try out horse riding. He wants to learn horse riding. So the father farmer could not deny. So he allowed the son to learn horse riding. And in the process, one day the son falls off the horse, and he breaks his one of his legs. So and that was a very peak time for harvesting. So on hearing the news, now he understood that whatever sadhu said probably was true, because now without the help of the son, he's going to lose out on a lot of harvesting opportunity. So whatever turned out to be the happiest moment of getting the gift of a horse is not anymore the happy moment, because his son has now broken his leg and sitting in the house, which is of not any help to the farmer. So now he goes back to that sadhu and he says that, I'm sorry once again, but now will you agree to me that this is the worst ever phase in my life, wherein I am not even able to harvest the crops of hard work of last 6 months, and now at least, so please tell, yes, this is a bad phase. But the sadhu was very much relaxed, and he again stresses, maybe so, may not be so. But now this villager, this farmer says the sadhu has gone mad. So maybe two times it turned out to be true, but not anymore. So he, in anger, he just leaves. So after a few days, it so happened that the neighboring king waged a war against this kingdom, and this kingdom in which he was living didn't have enough strength in soldiers. So the king announced that every house should give or send their able-bodied men to ensure that there is safety. So, and at that time, when the soldiers started going house to house, so they came to this farmer's house, and they saw this son So, but because he had broken his leg, they did not take him. And everybody knew in that kingdom that for sure whoever is going to go to the war will be defeated and killed, because the person who was coming to attack was a very strong and a powerful warrior. But the soldiers did not take his son. And now the farmer realizes that if he had not broken his leg, then he would have been gone forever. So, in other words, this is true for all of us in our lives, that we take decisions based on certain phases in life. We think this is good for me and this is not good for me. So, but the situations, as the sadhu explained, it could be maybe so or may not be so. We don't know. So, the best way is to work in God consciousness. And when we work as per the directions of God, then he need not worry about the results. So even if it is a bad phase or a good phase, we don't have to go into the details. So this is what is explained in the 56th and 57th verses, that one should not be attached to the results or being happy or being distressed. And in the 58th verse, Krishna is giving an example. This is the third symptom that he is explaining. That one who can, he says, he gives the example of a tortoise. Kurmongani va sarvashaha. So, just like a tortoise has this unique feature of withdrawing its limbs whenever it requires, and it exhibits the limbs whenever it wants. So, similarly, a yogi, a person who is realized, that is tasya prajna pratishtita, the last line of the 58th verse. So one whose consciousness is fixed in God, such a person will not engage the senses in sense objects, but rather he retracts that. So in other words, the Shastras explain that it is very difficult for the yogi to control senses, because the senses are compared to be serpents. So it is very difficult. But a devotee or a yogi who's fixed his consciousness in Krishna, he is like a snake charmer. So just like a snake charmer is not fearful of snake, he knows how to bring the snake under control. So similarly, a devotee can control his senses because he is engaged in God's service. So, in other words, these do's and don'ts are the integral part of spiritual life. Just like when we have to maintain our health, so or if we contact any disease, then there are certain foods which are prohibited and certain foods which are recommended. So, similarly, the spiritual life is also about do certain do's and certain don'ts. So it is not correct to say that spiritual life means you do anything that you wish, but still you can be spiritual. No, that's wrong. So, and in the 59th verse, this is a very important verse, in fact, and which is the basis for many activities and principles of ISKCON, founded by Srila Prabhupada. So it's a very important verse where Krishna is giving a practical application or a formula how to control the senses. In the previous verse, he's talking about one who can control his senses, withdraw its senses just like a tortoise. But now, how to do that? He is giving an example in the 59th verse. So, the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, though the taste for sense objects remain. In other words, this restricting the senses from sense objects, it cannot be an artificial stoppage, because when you artificially stop, it will not last forever, because the taste for that remains. Just like a diseased person, we all have experienced a certain phase of disease in our lives. So when we are down with certain fever or whatever be it, so we are asked not to eat certain foods. And if you have observed, it is exactly at that time that you will desire to eat that particular thing which has been avoided, which has been told by the doctor to avoid it. So the taste for the sense objects remain. So in other words, similarly, we may try to artificially restrict the senses from the sense objects, but that is not possible because the taste remains. So then what is the solution? The solution Krishna is giving in this verse, Rasavarjam rasopyasya param drishtva nivartate. Param drishtva nivartate means to engage in a higher taste. When you engage the higher taste, then the lower taste we will automatically give up. Say, suppose there is a sweet which is made of oil and there is a sweet which is made of ghee. So now you like sweets. So therefore, you are attracted to the oil sweet made of oil. So now the one way to get rid of that is by tasting the higher type of sweet. That is, when you taste the sweet made of ghee, you will automatically give up the sweet made of oil. So you don't have to really strive hard. So see, and Prabhupada also gives the example, just like the small children. So they're all sometimes very cranky. They will not allow the parents to do the work and all that. So now if you ask the child to remain quiet, so not to disturb the mother, will that happen? So no, they will never be able to do that. But on the other hand, if the mother, intelligent mother, gives some engaging toys for the child, then automatically the child ceases troubling the parents, mother. So in this, the toys are the higher taste for the child. So similarly, Krishna is telling that yes, although it is not difficult to control, but if one experiences rasavarjam rasopyasya param drishtva nivartate, a higher taste, so then you will not really, you need not worry about sense control. In fact, this is the reason why you find so many varieties of foods as prasadam when you come to our ISKCON temples. That is because Krishna is the source of all the food. He explains in the next chapter how by yagna rain comes and how by rain the food grains come. So now when Krishna is the source of all the food that is available to us, now what is wrong in offering all these foods to Krishna? So why prasadam, in traditionally in our concept it means it is like pongal or curd rice, only this can be prasadam. Whereas when you come to our temple stores, you will see pasta, pizza, burger, prasadam. So that is again the basis of those things is this words where Krishna is telling Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Ruchyate. This is the definition of bhakti given by Narada Muni in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So where the act of engaging Rishikena, our senses, in the service of Rishikesha, the master of the senses, that is called bhakti. So now when we engage in bhakti, the process of God consciousness, then automatically sense control is achieved. Now suppose when we offer food to Krishna and enjoy that, then we will not hanker for the bhoga, we will not hanker for other foods. So similarly, one who engages in Krishna's service, then automatically the sense control is achieved. So therefore, you see in ISKCON temples also we do a lot of singing. So everybody is attracted to music. So we sing Krishna's bhajans. So and then we are all attracted to seeing beautiful forms. So therefore, Prabhupada says that Krishna's deity and Radha's deity has to be beautifully decorated so that we enjoy that form, beauty of the Lord. So in other words, the controlling senses, the secret is not to artificially restrain them, but to engage in the higher taste. So and then in the 60 and 61st verse, Krishna is continuing to tell that how strong is the senses. The senses are so strong and impetuous that they forcibly carry away the mind even of a man of discrimination. He is not talking about a normal common man, a layman. Even if there is a man of discrimination, but even if one of the senses are so strong that if he focuses on sense objects, then he will lose control. Just like we hear in the Shastras about Vishwamitra. So he was a great sage. He was trying to control his senses by meditation. But when Menaka tried to seduce him, so Vishwamitra broke his meditation. So the secret for controlling senses is fixing the mind upon Krishna, which is revealing in the 61st verse. One who restrains his senses and fixes his consciousness upon me. So this is the param drishtva, the higher taste that Krishna talked about in the previous verse. Now he's directly revealing what is that higher taste. So one who restrains his senses and fixes his consciousness upon me. So when we try to fix our consciousness on Krishna, this is the secret of controlling senses. On the other hand, the converse is also true. If we do not fix our mind on Krishna, then sense control is practically not possible. In fact, in the Shastra, there is also the example of a Durvasa Muni. So Durvasa Muni was a great sage who had achieved all the sense control. He was a perfect yogi. So, but at one point, even he loses the sense control. So, in the example of his dealing with Ambarish Maharaj, so it so happens that once he had come with a huge disciple army to Ambarish Maharaj. That was the day of Dwadashi. Ekadashi had just gotten over, and Dwadashi was about to begin. So at that time, so Ambarish Maharaj was about to break the fast, but when he received the guest, he wanted to first offer the food to Durvasa Muni and then break his fast. And when Durvasa Muni was invited for honoring Prasad, he denied, saying that he wants to first go and take his bath. So then Ambarish Maharaj could not, Ambarish was a great devotee of Lord. So Ambarish Maharaj said, okay. So, but when Durvasa went for taking bath, knowingly, deliberately, Durvasa delayed. So he wanted to know what Ambarish will do if he doesn't go on time. On the other hand, the time for breaking the Ekadashi fast was getting over. So now Ambarish was in the duality, in the dual mind as to whether should he break his fast, because if he breaks his fast, then it is like he has not waited for Durvasa. On the other hand, if he waits for Durvasa on the matter of etiquette, so then he will lose the effect of fasting on Ekadashi. So when he was in such a confusion, he decided to take water because then it will serve both. See, because water fasting, it is both like breaking the fast as well as not breaking the fast. Because taking water is one type of fasting, and taking without water fasting is another type of fasting called as Nirjala Ekadashi. So Ambarish Maharaj thought that if I take water, then my Nirjala will be broken, but still my Ekadashi will still be intact. So, but then he decides to have water. And Durvasa Muni, by his divine vision, he saw this that Ambarish had taken water. So he comes back and gets too much angry, and he creates a demon out of his anger. And that demon rushes towards Ambarish Maharaj to kill him. So at that time, Ambarish Maharaj, with his mind fixed on Krishna, he prays to the Lord for protection, and that's when the Sudarshana Chakra comes to his protection. It is all this story is explained in Srimad Bhagavatam, and the Sudarshana Chakra not only kills that demon but will also start chasing Durvasa Muni. And Durvasa Muni, out of fear of his life, he goes to Brahma Loka and seeks protection from Lord Brahma. Brahma says that he cannot protect him from Sudarshana. And then he goes to Lord Shiva. Even Shiva denies help. And finally, Durvasa goes to even Vaikuntha Loka and prays to Vishnu to retract his weapon, Sudarshana Chakra. But Vishnu says that Sudarshana, once he goes out in that fit of anger, so he will not, come back so easily to me also. So then Durvasa asks Vishnu, what is the solution now? If you are helpless, Sudarshana is your servant, it's your weapon. So then, Vishnu says, Lord Vishnu tells Durvasa, the only way is you have to go and seek forgiveness from Ambarish. So then finally Durvasa, with no other hopes, comes back and falls at the feet of King Ambarish Maharaj and then seeks forgiveness. And at that time, when Ambarish Maharaj offered his prayers to Sudarshana to pacify his anger, then Sudarshana forgives Durvasa Muni. So this is the example to say that although Durvasa had achieved greater heights of perfection in terms of sense control, but because he was not a devotee like Ambarish Maharaj, who used to engage all his senses in remembering the God, so he could not control. In other words, the secret for controlling the senses is fixing mind upon Krishna, and that is the Param Društva, the higher taste. And in the next verse 62 and 63, so Krishna is explaining the cycle of what happens when we contemplate. on the sense objects. So in fact, this is how the whole advertisement industry works also. So you will understand that Krishna is explaining in these two verses that when we contemplate or think of some kind of a sense object, it could be eatable, it could be a place to be visited, it could be meeting a person, it could be of any type, the senses meeting the sense objects or music, whatever. So when we think of that sense object, what happens when we are contemplating? There is attachment, subtle attachment getting established. And because and when that attachment becomes stronger, that turns into lust. What is the definition of lust? When we try to engage the senses in sense objects, that is called lust. And that lust will then later get transformed into anger. So how Krishna very scientifically is explaining the process, what happens when we contemplate or think of a sense object. So contemplation leads to attachment, attachment leads to lust, lust leads to anger, and anger leads to delusion or illusion. That means we will lose the discretion of good and bad, right and wrong. So we see so many times, intelligent people, educated people engaging in such heinous crimes. So they know that this is not supposed to be done. But why? Because there is a strong attachment, lust, anger. And because of all of these things which has come from the contemplation, the delusion. So and when one is experiencing that delusion, the thick illusion, then there is bewilderment of memory. That means the good and bad, we know that yes, it is, this is not right, but that memory is covered. And when the memory is covered, intelligence is lost. And when intelligence is lost, one falls down into the material pool. Now, why is Krishna telling here one falls down into the material pool? Because when we get attached to our body, when we engaging in sense enjoyment without the consideration of God consciousness or working for Krishna or working for Buddhi Yoga, then what will happen? One falls down into the material pool. It means we keep circulating in the 84 lakhs of species. We will not get that intelligence of how to escape out of this cycle of birth and death. So that is the effects of one contemplating on the sense objects. And in the 64, 65, and 66, these three verses can be seen together, where Krishna is talking about regulated principles of freedom. So, regulative principles of freedom. In fact, sometimes when people hear this phrase the first time, they see it's a contradiction, because regulation means restriction. And how can regulation lead to freedom? Regulative principles of freedom. So that means Krishna is telling here, when we restrict our senses from sense enjoyment, we will be able to achieve a higher sense of freedom. So it is possible very much by the mercy of the Lord. And that's how in ISKCON also, all the initiated disciples, we are supposed to follow the four regulative principles: no meat eating, no intoxication, no gambling, and no illicit affairs. So that means connections outside marriage. So, in other words, these four principles, like we discussed in the previous few verses about how there are do's and don'ts. So, similarly, these are all talking about the don'ts. Now, avoiding the usage of senses is not advised, but to engage in the service of the Lord. So, that is what in the 66, 5th and 66th verse also you can see. So, 64, 65, and 66. These three can be seen with a common theme. So in the 65, Krishna is telling, for one who is situated in the divine consciousness. What is the divine consciousness? That is in the consciousness of working for the pleasure of Krishna. So now Arjuna is not finding pleasure to fight the war, but Krishna is telling all this, do fight for my sake. So do not consider the results. So and do not be attached to the good and bad. So be free from all the attachment and aversion. So this is such divine consciousness. When you work, the threefold miseries. You see again in the previous verses he had talked about tapatraya. Now Krishna is telling that one who works in such consciousness meaning working in Krishna consciousness, God consciousness, divine consciousness, then the threefold miseries will not exist. And in such a happy state, one's intelligence soon becomes steady. So on that side, when you engage senses in sense objects, the intelligence will be lost and one will fall down into the material pool in the Janma Mrityu Samsara Chakra. On the other hand, when works with divine consciousness, with the principles of freedom, regulative principles of freedom, then in such a state, one's intelligence becomes steady. And then in the 66th, he says, one who is not in transcendental consciousness, that means if you're not in such God consciousness, can neither have a controlled mind nor a steady intelligence. And without all of this, peace is not possible. And without peace, there is no happiness. So, in fact, Krishna tells in the later in the 5th chapter, Bhoktaram Yajna Tapasam Sarva Loka Maheshwaram Suradam Sarva Bhutanam Jnatva Mam Shanti Mruchati. He says, what is the way of attaining peace? One who considers me, that means Krishna, as the real enjoyer, Bhoktaram Yajna Tapasam, that I am the enjoyer of all the sacrifices and yajnas. Bhoktaram Yajna Tapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram, that God, Krishna, is the owner of all the planetary systems, and Surudam Sarva Bhutana. So one who considers me as the only real friend. All other friends, all other relations have a beginning and have an end. But one who establishes his relationship with Krishna as the real friend, he will attain peace. So Krishna is talking about this verse later in the 5th chapter as an explanation. So I just mentioned that. I'll just move on. 67 and 68th verse we can see together. So where Krishna is telling, but if you don't have such transcendental consciousness, but engage the senses in sense objects. So where he has described that how it will fall down into the material pool, he further again comes back here that not that all the senses has to engage in sense objects. Even if one of the senses on which the mind focuses, then the just like the boat will be swept by the strong wind, similarly a man's intelligence will be carried away. So Vayur Navam Ivam Bhasi. So in other words, Bhagavatam further explains that just like if you see different senses that we have, especially the knowledge acquiring senses. So for example, eyes. So they give the example of a moth. So just like when there is fire, the moths are attracted to the fire, the beautiful type how it looks, the fire. So the moth rushes towards fire but loses its life. Similarly, the music, the ears. So there are snakes, so which get caught because of the music, or the fish is attracted by the sense of taste. So the bait is always used, some food is kept as a bait so that the fish gets trapped. Similarly, elephant is moved by the sense of touch. So if at all you want to capture a wild elephant, male elephant, so they send the female elephant so that the male elephant gets captured. So in other words, Krishna is telling here, even if one of the senses gets focused on one of the sense objects, so they will lose their intelligence. In other words, just like you see these days, some doctors. So because if you tell lot of restrictions that you should not eat this, you should not do this, then the patient will stop coming. So, and I've seen this change in my own life, where these days the doctors, when you go with a certain disease, they say, no, that's okay. You can, I specifically ask, is there any restriction during this time? No restriction. You can keep having everything. Because the more they give the list of restrictions, the more the patient will feel bad about it. And they might even stop coming to the doctor. So therefore, these days, doctors say you can do everything, but you just keep taking these medicines. So similarly, the fake Babajis, the sadhus also, they want to get more disciples. They want to become more famous. So they say, yeah, spirituality means you can do everything that you want, nonsense, but chant this mantra and you will be progressing in spiritual life. So the real sadhu will not tell that, because the real sadhu has understood that the spiritual advancement and sense enjoyment do not go well together. So they are inversely proportional to each other. So this is what we can understand. And in the 69th verse, Krishna is talking about the difference between two kinds of beings, the material beings and the spiritual beings. Material beings means those who are engaged in sense enjoyment, those who are engaging their senses in sense objects. And spiritual beings means those who are engaging their senses in the service of God. So these two people, how their worlds are totally different. Krishna is telling what is day for one is the night for other, and what is night for one is day for another. This we see many times in our life also, when we go and meet some people who have not much understood about our organization. They say, Swamiji, come, let us go to a nearby hotel. It serves good food. So when we say, no, no, we don't go to hotels. You don't eat in hotels? You don't go to movies? So you don't go to malls? So they are very surprised about how a person can live like that. So similarly, those who have realized the importance of this life are also amused to see that how people are not realizing Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadhi. How are they so blind to the realities of life? So the both these beings have different perspectives in their life. So what is night for one is day for another. So that is the meaning of the 69th verse. And the 70th verse, Krishna is telling that how devotee means he will be stand still like an ocean. Although different rivers may enter, but still he will remain steady. So we can also remember, I would like to share a short story. I'll try to conclude in 5 minutes. So there was once a person who was searching for something, and he could not find when he was searching in an open environment. So many other people gathered, and he said that, no, I'm searching for a gold pin. So when he said gold pin, so then many other people also joined in his effort and also started searching. So even after a long time of searching, nobody could find anything. And one of the intelligent people amongst those, he went to this main person who initiated the search of searching a gold pin, that asking, when did you, remember seeing this pin last, so that we can more pinpoint the area of search. So, to this question, this person replies that I remember seeing it inside my room last. After that, I didn't see. So then, this all these people were surprised to hear that. They said, "No, if you have seen this pin last in your room, why are you searching here?" So, similarly, we all have lost our happiness internally. So, by the soul not engaging in Krishna's service, we have lost the sense of happiness. But what are we doing? We are trying to outside, externally, and we will never be able to find that. Just like that person will be never be able to find that gold pin by searching outside his house, because he has lost that gold pin inside the room. So similarly, we also have to find that happiness from within, not from without. So that is the meaning of the 70th verse. And 71st verse, Krishna is telling that a person who has given up all desires for sense enjoyment, who lives free from desires, and who has given up all sense of proprietorship and devoid of falsehood, he can attain peace. So you may ask, Swamiji, is this possible? So later Prabhupada gives an explanation, because we all agree that only a stone can be desireless, right? So now, whereas Krishna is telling here that one who has given up desires for sense gratification, so one who has given up all lives free from desires. So you may ask, Swamiji, how is it practically possible to be desireless? So in other words, the great devotees explain that desireless means not desiring for oneself, but desiring for Krishna, working for the pleasure of Krishna. Now we want to see a lot of beautiful places. So yes, you can travel to the places where Krishna has performed, leelas as yatra. So you want to eat different kinds of foods. Yes, you can have, provided you offer that to Krishna. The bhoga is offered to Krishna first, so that it becomes prasadam. So similarly, this is called Yukta Vairagya, as Rupa Goswami, one of the great Acharyas, explains, renunciation with wisdom. So we will not go deep into it. So and finally, in the 72nd verse, Krishna explains that by such consciousness, by the consciousness of being desireless for oneself, being desirous of only Krishna's service, this is the way of spiritual and godly life, and after attaining which is man is not bewildered, and being so situated, at the point of death one can enter into the kingdom of God. What is the importance of entering into the kingdom of God? Because Krishna explains in the later verses, na tad bhasayate suryo na shashanko na pavakaha yadgatva na nivartante tadhama paramam mama. So that means if one goes to the kingdom of Krishna, there is no more birth or death, or there is no more any miseries. This tapatraya is not there anymore. So, and how can one enter the kingdom of death? By maintaining such consciousness even at the time of death. What is the consciousness? God consciousness. So, of engaging oneself in the service of Krishna, which is the higher taste. And that when we do that, automatically the senses are controlled. We don't have to artificially endeavor for sense control. So, this is how Krishna summarizes the second chapter and concludes it. So, in the next session, we will see the third chapter, that is the Karma Yoga, how further Krishna explains. And after hearing all this, the symptoms of Sthita Prajna that Krishna explained from verses 54 to 72, then Arjuna comes up with one more new confusion. So, what is that confusion and how Krishna will address that? So, we will see that in the chapter 3 in the next session. I think since it is already late, 8:10, so I feel we will not, you can all chant by yourself today. So, and I will not take your time. So, we will try to catch up in the next session. Thank you. Hare Krishna.